Welcome to another episode of the Perf Roundtable. Today we're going to be talking about bench press rules and how it's played out across how we've programmed it, the way we prescribe the movement as well, kind of changes in order to address people that are definitely high archers and needed to change in order to fit the rule set. So I'm just curious out of you guys, according to the IPF, they said the rule change would affect 5% of the population. So working within your own roster, how have you guys seen that proportion in which the rules affected?
Who wants to go first?
I can go.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably affected more people than the IPF intended to. Because just in my roster itself, I can think of a number of different people that it's affected, and we've all had to opt for different kind of methods to be able to hit depth. And I don't believe it's some of them, like we don't have a major arch, right? Including myself. It's not like phenomenal, it's not huge. But it's affected me because of leverages.
Yeah.
So it's more based on leverages rather than making the lift look, I suppose, stupid by arching as much as we possibly could, which has been probably the hardest part. And in terms of programming, it was hard because we all had to, I guess, put ourselves in a competition kind of situation to be able to understand how the rest were going to judge it. So the more that we've seen early on, I believe that they were being a lot stricter because they were looking for it a lot more. But the more competitions that kind of went through, the less red lights we started to see.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if that's because the athletes adapted to it or the refs adapted to the ruling better as well.
I think the refs have adapted to the ruling better from the sides. I've noticed. Yeah, like even on the weekend just gone, it's pretty clear to see on the sides now when it is and isn't a red light. And I think when it first started, we weren't really sure what we were looking at. But now, even after just 2 competitions with it, I'm like, yeah, I get that.
Yeah, it's so hard to see, right? Like
yeah,
if we're looking at a hip crease in a squat, like that's so easy to see because the soft seat pronounces the hip crease so much that we're able to see that go below the knees. But we're looking at an elbow joint, and depending on how much you move your elbows or your arms in a specific direction dictates where they end up. So if you kind of externally rotate and you come further down, you're going to end up higher no matter what. You can't really get around it because that's just where your elbow is forward of your body.
I think the issue isn't so much like the elbow, but it's like identifying where the top of the shoulder is, right? Because it's like they define it as the top of the shoulder as like the most superior part of the shoulder. So like when you put your hand on top of yourself when you're standing, that's the place that you need to identify while you're lying down. And if the head refs are watching it from head on, they can't notice that like change from like a 3D or depth perspective. It's just
very subjective.
Really difficult, very subjective rule.
Yeah, I think to answer your question though, Danny, it has affected more than 5% of the population. But it has affected more than 5% of the population for different reasons, which isn't a big arch.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's been the major kind of cock up with it is that like with squats, right? You go up, you go down. With bench, there's so many different ways you can bench. Like there's different ways you can squat, but it's very easy to see if the hip crease is below 90 degrees, right? And it's quite, you can see it on most athletes, you know what I'm saying? Like it's but with the elbow, like Steve was saying before, you can internally rotate, you can externally rotate, you can flare, you can tuck, you can drop your arch and flare, you can drop your arch and tuck. Like, you know what I mean? So there's so many different, and that's why it's so subjective, because it's not just the hip crease needs to be below 90 degrees, and it's that you can't just say your elbow needs to be below your shoulder joint when the humerus is literally different, and the forearm and the rib cage are all different sizes, lengths on people.
Yeah.
So that's been the biggest shot. It's been, once we figured it out, like we know how to all work around it now, right? Different people. But the refs, I feel sorry for them because they're going to have to analyze the leverage is on the person, what they expect the lift to look like, and then the pause as well, and then the butt,
Yeah, it's so much.
and then the neck. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think as coaches, we can all address it through like biomechanics, cueing, and things like that. But for the refs, it's so difficult because, like you said, there's so much that they need to look out for. And the fact that it is a new rule, and like Leanne said, it is a subjective kind of ruling as well. Officiating is different across like pretty much every single competition I've seen. Like, and I don't think it's the fault of the individual refs, but it literally is a matter of perspective. And so you've seen some competitions where they've been very strict, and then you go and see another comp and it's been quite lenient, but there's no real standard. Like, although there is the standard of what the new rule is, it's so perceptive intensive that it's just difficult, right?
Like you said,
Yeah.
Kelly, it's like, it's not the same as squat because you can just you just go deeper. Whereas elbows, it's like you can't just say, oh yeah, just go a bit deeper. Like, it's not that simple to it's hard.
Yeah. I want to tie it towards how we've adjusted it though, right? So since the rule change came out, it's kind of been an arms race to find what's the most effective way to hit depth without getting weaker in the process. Because we all could just flat back arch, like flat back, close grip, and we'd all hit depth. But the problem is our totals would just tank more than what the rule would already be doing, right? And so I've got down a couple of methods that I've seen all of us kind of try out, implement. First one I've got is sync bench. Like, I know Steve, Kelly, you guys have been trialing sync bench. What are your thoughts on sync?
You go first, Steve.
I love it. I get to do it myself. So the most, I guess, interesting thing was my programming didn't change. We thought it was going to change dramatically just because of how it was and how the movement was and how it felt, but we didn't have enough time to be able to change anything. So we just ran it and it worked great. The taper was different to what I had done in the past in terms of because my arms got beat up. I felt more beat up through the upper body than I have done previously in a meet prep.
Yeah.
But that we just accounted for that through tapering one day into the competition, and I was completely fine. If anything, probably the strongest my bench has ever been on the platform.
It looked peaked.
Yeah, and it was not intentionally peaked either. It was just like that whole nothing I did for that competition was peaked, right? But bench just was the strongest it felt throughout all of training.
Yeah,
Nice.
definitely.
Would you say it's more like muscular intensive compared to back when it was like max arch, sync bench?
Yeah, well, and there's less margin for error with sync, I feel. Because all I've got to do now is control that into my chest and let it go to a certain point, get the press call, and then I can actually just like not think and just press as hard as I can. Whereas when I was, using a more technical style of bench, there was a lot of things that could go wrong, and they used to go wrong on meet day. Just because, different environments, sometimes it's a different bench press. You also have different refs, like judging the press calls and everything like that, not the people that you're around, which usually you can just like, you get used to if you're getting the same person that's giving you a press call all the time, when they're going to say it. So you kind of are ready for it. Whereas when I was being extremely technical in the way that I was doing the bench press, I'd get on the competition platform and it would be completely different. It would feel completely different because even if it was just like a couple of milliseconds either way, it'd be different to what I was used to in training.
Yep. And your arm kind of affected that a lot because in training you could work around your arm, but on the platform your arm had to work around the refs. Yeah, that's kind of how I put it in when I was watching your bench, especially I think at ACT stakes or something like that. You could see that just a little bit longer of the press call it struggled because you were so used to working around what your arm could do.
Yeah, 100%. My arm's always been like a limiting factor, especially after I squat.
Yeah.
Especially because when I was utilizing that more technical side of bench press, there was so much going on through my upper body, my arms, that after I squat something so large and have that on my back, it would really like tank my upper body and make my upper body feel more fatigued going into bench press. So then now that I sunk, it was just like I didn't even feel like I'd squatted beforehand, even though I didn't do anything spectacular or anything that like that's too heavy for my standard. It didn't feel like I'd done anything really.
I noticed you went from handout to no handout as well. Do you think that that's kind of helped with you feeling more in control of bench itself?
More in control in terms of the start call is way quicker than what I was used to.
Yeah.
It was just like out, and then it was just like start straight away because the rest can all see everything right away.
Yeah, for sure. Was that unrelated? So that was like unrelated to trying to hit depth though, right? That was just something you picked up along the way?
Yeah, that was something I was already implementing. I'd already was like, I'm not going to get a handout anymore. Because I used to be so relaxed that when I get a handout, someone would take a lot of the load and, you know, I'd pull my shoulders into position as hard as possible while using the bar, but I can just do that myself now.
Yeah, for sure. I think like going on a bit of a tangent, but I think I agree very much in the same way. Like if your self unrack is efficient, it just makes that start call a lot easier, a lot quicker. And if it's easily replicated, like I wouldn't see why not, because sometimes people might unrack in a way that can throw you off, and especially if you're a very technical lifter, that could make or break the lift as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Big fan of self unrack.
I've used the no handout to actually help with my depth. So before, because I was like really driving into the back of my neck and I'd get my like ribs up so high that just getting someone to help give me a handout, I can hold that position. Whereas now it's more like I don't really want to do that because I need to keep a little bit more range rather than trying to keep the ribs up really high.
Yeah, for sure. What are some other things that you've addressed to hit depth, Leanne?
I've gone through a whole heap of changes. Like I started with feet really far out, like really, really relaxed back, low arch, but that felt like shit. And then I slowly started to bring my feet further in. Now I've ended up having my feet actually further in than where they were previously when I was really high arch, really small range. I guess that's increased the range slightly. But then I guess the main thing at the moment is like flared. So really flared allows me to be able to hit depth with kind of like a higher touch point.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's the biggest thing for me that I've found has worked.
Did you guys run into issues initially? Or you go, Kelly. I guess you're about to touch on it.
Yeah. Okay. So definitely with Leanne, I guess there's two types of major benching in this. There's the benchers like Steve, yourself, and Meg, and Tom Chap, who have short humerus, and a large rib cage, right? And then we've got the long armed people. So it's a completely different type of bench. So with Leanne, she can keep her arch, but she has to be able to flare so wide to be able to hit depth. So the biggest thing is being able to internally rotate the humerus and to really tilt the scap while retracting at the same time. Now, initially, for most people, that feels like dog shit. And it felt like shit for you initially, but...
Yeah, like a little bit. And I was going, well, I kind of still am working through like some shoulder issues, but I think that now that I'm learning how to maintain slight retraction whilst keeping the flare, it feels really good.
Yeah. I think the thing is for what Leanne's done really well is take her time with it. So it's been like a 6 month, 8 month process. A long time. And you know, the Perf Cup peak and stuff was excellent, almost back to where she was. But it's been a long road of getting into that position. I think that's been the difference with Meg and Steve is the sink is less technical, but because of the long humerus, you still have to keep that technical aspect of the bench. So that's where the differences lie there, is that Leanne stays very technical, whereas the other two guys can kind of muscle their way through it, and that's how they prefer to bench anyway.
Let's think, more think.
Yeah, less think, more sink. Does that make sense? And that's why it's worked really well for Tom too, because he muscles his bench as well. And you can't teach someone who likes to muscle their bench to go technical, because it's just not going to work on the platform, right? I tried with Meg, and it was terrible. And we tried the flare, didn't work. Too short, humorous. We tried to keep technical, didn't work. Couldn't hold it.
Yeah, well, that's like me too, right? Like I
couldn't
tried so much first before I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna sink it.
Yeah, and it's so much better.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, if you get the sink right, man, that's a powerful bench.
Well, if we look at like Sheffield and the world records in the especially the male side, every single one of them sunk. Keiko sinks, Jesus sinks, Mickey D sinks. Like,
yeah, strong.
It works, right?
Yeah,
seems like more of the males, like more guys do it than girls. Do you think?
Because you do need you need a lot of muscle.
Yeah,
you do.
Yeah,
you need some mass.
You need some mass. You need a lot of muscle.
Trampoline chest. Need that trampoline.
Yeah. I don't think we didn't. We initially changed a fair amount of your program, Leanne, and now we've morphed back into the way it used to be. So I took it because the range was so long to start with, and you were getting a lot of DOMs, hey, because your arch, you were on that end of that arch being super, super high. Yeah. So the range changed a lot, and there was a lot of DOMs and a lot of not pain, but just like you couldn't really get through much because of there's so much DOMs. Yeah. Now it's at this now I've got reps back. Now we're back to pretty much the same amount of volume as before, but it's had to be laid on.
Yeah, and I think also felt like it was really hard to find what days felt strongest, because every single day I had DOMs, so I was like, yeah. But now it feels good, and I feel like I can actually figure out which days feel the strongest, and I can start to push like all of the days as well.
I think with it, what really annoys me is the subjectivity of the range of motion. Like, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but when lifters lose their ability to externally rotate, they get really scoopy off the chest with the elbows, right? And that makes it look like it's high.
Yeah.
But it's not. And that's what's really
it makes
annoying
it look
me.
like they hit depth after it comes off the chest. Yeah.
That's why it's that I think that is the only thing that's really annoying me at the moment, because you can't predict when that's going to happen.
Yeah. I guess unless you kind of play towards the rules and you drop your arch even more, but that's just accepting like a much weaker bench, right? And for us as coaches and coming from being very technical in bench, I think that's who it affects the most, like being unable to let go of the numbers that you used to hit. And there is a degree of adjustment period. Like I don't think my bench is as strong as what it used to be back when it was like still max arch. But I think in time it'll kind of recalibrate.
Yeah, I think the only person whose benches stay the same is yours, Steve.
Yeah.
Like, Meg's has taken a hit, Tom's has taken a little bit of a hit, yours took a hit, Leanne. So, the only way is up, dude.
Yeah, for sure.
I think Danny's was good too. Like we went through a phase, right, where we were like, okay, we got to hit depth. I want you to hit depth today. And then like this day, let's just output the fuck out of it and do what you were doing. Rather than like, because we got too close to competition and it was like, we can't change too much. But we still want to be able to press the weights that you've pressed before. So I was like, okay, we'll output the fuck out of this day, and then I need you to hit depth this day. And that was just through like communicating each day, right? I was like, he's not hitting depth today, but feels super strong. And I was like, okay, just output. And then other days it was like, depth is just a little bit higher, and I'd be like, nah, hit depth. I want you to hit depth, and then call it as soon as you get there.
Yeah, that's a mistake that we made with Meg. Was not a mistake. She wanted to do that last competition at the end of December, bench 142.5, could have benched 150 if she wanted to. then we only had 8 weeks to go and make depth. It wasn't long enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was nowhere near enough time.
That was a really weird teething period.
Yeah, it was shit. But there's only she still benched 120. No, 125. But it felt terrible. It was not peaked. It was a mess. Only because we just didn't have the time to be able to work it out, and we didn't even know. Like I think her husband said to her, "You should sink bench," and she was like, "Oh, yeah, I'll try sink bench." And then it was just straight away like, "Fuck, this feels so good."
Nice.
I should have been doing sink years ago.
Yeah, I
think
found that.
frustrated.
I found that as well, like with one of my athletes who has she's kind of benches pretty similar to me. It's like because she sometimes tends to overthink, it's like, yes, we need to hit depth, but also like if you just continue to think just about depth, you're just going to go backwards all the time.
That's what happened. That's what happened for that 8 weeks.
Yeah.
Was just thinking about depth, and then it was shit because it was only like, am I going to hit depth? Am I going to hit depth? And then you totally forget about the performance, and all you're doing is looking at depth.
Yeah, but that was through that time period where all those first competitions were coming out. We're seeing the one in Denmark, right, where that guy bombed and it looked like it was depth from all angles.
But he was
he
a
bombed.
tucky, and that's why it sucks, this rule, because he was tucky. That's why
Yeah.
it looks like it's not depth, because his humerus is so short that he had to tuck, and now he's gonna have to go. All right, now I'm gonna have to figure out. He'll just go to sink.
Yeah, well, that's what I've done because I can't get away from it. I couldn't flare. That hurts my arm way too much. So
it would.
I literally bring my grip in 1 or 2 fingers, and then have the exact same setup and the exact same pinch. I just sink now. That was like, okay, this is the least actual change that I have to make. This feels great, and I can just replicate this over and over. And it started off really messy, but now it's not. Feels good, consistent. Like I can just replicate it rep to rep. My rep work actually took a huge hit.
Yes, that's what I've found as well. The rep work on all ends has taken a massive hit, but it comes back.
Yeah, it's slowly coming back now. But like I benched like 140 for 8 or plus, but I'm down like 125-ish for around those reps, but it's like slowly coming back. It's just because I just get so tight, and because we're like kind of heaving and pressing, scaps come out of position more frequently, whereas was I was self-touching, which was like holding that position, just extending the elbows the whole time.
Yeah, definitely.
You kind of have to accept it though as well. Just, I mean, it's kind of the nature of the beast now, right?
Yeah, it is what it is. I didn't care as long as my top ends stayed the same. So sweet.
Yeah. What did you do, Danny? So you guys, because you were a big arch and you have short you have short humerus. What have you guys done?
I started off similar to Leanne. Like I thought about like just dropping the arch. So I brought my feet out really wide and I just lost all my leg drive, and that was frustrating.
Yeah.
Then I think I had a period where I was just like, fuck it, I'm just gonna keep benching the way I'm benching.
Everyone went through that period.
And then I tried grip width, like going in more narrow, and that didn't change a single thing. That was still high. And so I thought like, but then when I did my Larsen press, I'd be able to hit depth consistently. And so I kind of reverse engineered and thought like, okay, well, something needs to extend a little less, so my rib cage doesn't flare as high. And then I literally probably wasn't consistently hitting depth until like 2 weeks out of Perf Cup. I essentially just concluded with being more dynamic with my leg drive. So when I used to set up with my legs, I'd push really hard and hold it to allow my ribs to like stay as extended as possible. But then doing that won't allow me to hit depth. I don't have enough distance. And so now when I unrack, I go from like 0 leg drive, so my ribs stay low and it's kind of like constrained with the bar in my hands. And then as I start to lower, then I'll start to apply leg drive. And I think that compared to if I were to hold leg drive at the start, my ribs still won't get as high. They can still get high and I can still produce leg drive. So that kind of ticks off like being able to produce force.
Mm.
It's pretty iffy. Like it's not a 100% consistent kind of thing.
Yeah, I was gonna
So
ask.
yeah, there's times where it would still be high, but I can just adjust it for the next set. I can just apply a little less leg drive. But I think for me, that's felt the strongest.
And you guys haven't changed your program at all?
I think initially it did.
A tiny bit. It wasn't much though.
Yeah, it's not much.
Yeah.
No, and it was
think-
more like I think we reverted to some ascending stuff to C as well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then now I think we've changed a bit, but the way that it performed on the platform, I was really, really happy.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
crazy. I
I've
don't
been
know what
very
happened
happy.
as well. I don't know what happened.
It just was strong.
Do you think that, here's my theory, here's my little theory. Do you think that because the loads are a little bit more controlled with the rep work and like the absolute strength throughout the week can be a little bit lower? Do you think that that's been a factor for peaking and tapering it?
Potentially. And I think it's also like with bench, we're able to get away with just like outputting so frequently, right? And just like we can program like an RP 7 or 8, but you know, we're hitting like a 9.5 or something. Something with like we couldn't have done a double of, but we could have probably done a few more kilos and we could get away with that before. But now it's like we're kind of constrained by like, why are you going to go up if you didn't even hit the standard? So we wouldn't go up. So it's like potentially we just auto-regulated a lot better without actually meaning to, and it just made things perform better.
That's kind of my theory, because everybody now is performing, and when I'm saying everybody, I'm saying everybody in my tight circle, which is you guys and a couple of others who have been affected by it, are performing better on the platform than they were before, and it's peaking better. My only thoughts is it's because it's more controlled and we're thinking about loads throughout the week a little bit more and less a little bit like, okay, I'm doing sevens, let's see how heavy I can go today.
Yeah.
Hey, that's just my theory. That's a theory that I'm going with at the moment. But we'll see how it pans out.
I've been a lot more stagnant too with my loads. Like
that's where
Monday,
I'm going. Yeah.
Oh no, it's not even fucking Monday now. Whatever day it is today. Today's Monday. Today's day that I hit like higher rep stuff is it just stayed the same the whole time. For me too, like before competition, I bench heavy like Wednesday, and I always will aim to hit what I hit on the platform or more than what I'm going to hit on the platform. So Wednesday before comp, I hit 170. And then I go and hit 165 on the platform. Like that's always been kind of my thing. But even regardless, like before nationals, I hit 185. I couldn't even bench 170 on the day.
Yeah, for sure.
But
I think
that was a huge hit.
My mindset changed. Like I had a full identity crisis during that teething period where it was like, okay.
So did Leanne.
Massive.
Like powerlifting does not reward technical benches anymore. And that's just the way it is. So the only way forward is to literally get stronger. And how do you get stronger is like push your accessories. And don't rely on your technique so much. You're gonna have to muscle it to some degree, more than what you have in the past.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing that I did well with Meg. As soon as and Leanne, as soon as the new bench rule came out, the accessories and the upper body just went skyrocketed. Arms, shoulders and arms, and just pushing dips.
Yeah, very big.
That's all
dips.
I do,
as hard as possible.
Literally. Why do we think dips work so well? Because I'm a very big fan of it.
It's the anterior tilt of the scap. So dips promote an anterior tilt of the scap. To get more depth, you need to be able to retract and anteriorly tilt at your scap, unless you're sinking. Does that make sense? So like if you think about if you're flaring in that position, you have to be able to come up. So dips do that at the top at the range.
Yeah, right. My perspective on it was like, because the depth rule is going to be demanding you to be, for some people, like a lot more extended, like go through more shoulder extension. Dips is like it's entirely from like 0 degrees to -90, right? So we're getting stronger in excess of what's required, and then when we go back to bench, it'll somewhat transfer, hopefully, because back when everything was max arch, technically we're going for myself, we'd be going through like 90 degrees coming down to almost like 45 degrees from the elbow to shoulder, whereas now it's like everyone is required to at least almost somewhat hit 90 degrees.
And what you just said is pretty much what I just said. Like, it's just going through more range of motion, and the new bench has to go through more range of motion. So that's why dips they just mimic the same thing.
The one thing that frustrates me about the whole rule the most is like a particular leverage person gets like double shafted now.
Yes, that's what sucks.
If we look at Meg and we look at someone like James, they're not built to deadlift and they're not built to hit depth on bench. Nope. So now they're getting double shafted. They're still built same to deadlift. They don't have long arms, and now they have to hit a particular range in their bench press, which makes it. I feel like I want to say unfair because they're both adapted really, really well.
Yeah,
but it doesn't help them whatsoever.
I can, you could probably speak for James and how he coped with that, but there was a period where Meg was pretty angry about it and felt like she'd been shafted. So, and I think that was the major reason why she just went and did that local, just to prove that she could bench as much as she wanted to on the platform. And, now her mindset's great. So she's come back from it, but it's definitely I used to be able to bench X amount. Now I have to bench this amount and deadlift this amount.
Yeah. My arms aren't going to get longer from lift to lift, right?
Nah,
I can't just change the way that I'm built because of your rules.
It's shit. But yeah, I think as a whole, we've adapted to it really well. I'm very interested to see how it goes in on that international platform this year. Especially with the.
Well, we did see the first international platform in Sheffield, and I felt like it was
lenient.
It was
lenient. I thought so too.
It was lenient.
But the rules, well, when it was blatantly high, you could tell that it was blatantly high. Like if I do recall, there was Ja Jacobs and then Agatha Sitko's. Both of theirs, like you could definitely see it was like, okay, that should receive a red, and it did. But then there were some that were like getting pretty questionable, and it was like, oh, like it could go 2-1, or it could be two side ref reds, and it was passable. I mean, for the lifter, it's a good thing. It's a good thing for a lifter. But
I think after that,
it's the way that the ruling is. In the rule book, it literally says like if like there's questionable about it, we rule in the lifter's favor. So I think when it gets to that point of it's like, oh, this is questionable. If you're having doubts about it, it should be a white light, right? Especially something like bench depth where you're looking at like the top of the shoulder that you can't even see.
Yeah, I think that's where it's gone really well after that initial teething period, is that like squats, you can see when it's high with bench depth now, and if it's not blatantly high, they're not calling reds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that's what I've noticed, and I like that.
Yeah, if all refs kind of agree on that, then I think like it's acceptable. I think it just gets hard when the standards are so different meet to meet that it's like, man, if you're not prepared for it, prepare to bomb. And it's like, what the heck?
Yeah,
literally, it's wild.
Like, it's wild. What am I showing up to today?
Literally. But yeah, I think that should conclude it today. Do you guys have anything else that you wanted to talk about for bench?
Not really. I think the biggest tip is for coaches and athletes is you can't work around your leverages. So if you've got long arms, you're going to have to flare. And if you've got short arms, go with the sink. And another tip would be don't change the whole program straight away. Let it play out.
Yeah, and I think if you do change it, your goal should be able to get back to what you were doing.
100%.
I found as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And which is doable. Like, you know, Steve, you've proven, and Leanne have both proven that you can get back to where you were. But you'll have to be okay with a hit to start with for most people. And that hit doesn't last forever.
No, it's just
Yeah.
finding what works, and then it's a pretty quick period after that.
Yeah, it's been creative. I think it's made me more creative with bench press programming, really.
Oh, heaps.
Yeah.
Like starting to think
Yeah.
outside the box with like what kind of accessories also transfer to benching.
And low prescription.
For sure. All right. Well, thanks, guys.
No
Thank you.
worries.